in the heart of Africa, amidst vast savannahs and dense forests, lurks a small settlement hidden from the eyes of civilization. This place, where every day begins with the first rays of the sun and the nights are filled with the sounds of wildlife, has been home to hundreds of generations. Here, far from the bustling cities, life flows in a measured and harmonious way. Traditions passed down from fathers to sons and customs ingrained in the souls of the people determine their every action, thought and prayer. The settlement is surrounded by tall baobabs, trees that are revered here as living beings, guardians of history and ancestral wisdom. In the shade of their mighty branches, bent to the ground like protectors, people find shelter from the hot sun and peace of mind. In the morning, when the sun is just beginning to break through the foliage, you can hear melodious sounds coming from the huts in the streets of the village, its women singing as they prepare breakfast for their families. Their voices merge with the singing of birds, creating a harmonious chorus that awakens the life around them. The main character in this story is a young woman named Amara. Her skin is the color of dark chocolate, her eyes are deep and calm, and her hair, braided into numerous pigtails, shimmers in the sun. Amara is the daughter of an elder known among her people as a wise and just leader. She has grown up amongst tradition, absorbing it from childhood, and has always dreamed of the day she would become a mother. In her society, the birth of a child is not just an event, it is a sacred sacrament marking the beginning of a new cycle of life. Now Amara is on the verge of fulfilling her most cherished dream. She's expecting her firstborn, her belly is rounded, and every day she feels the new life stirring inside her more and more. Her husband, Kwesi, a strong and caring man, works in the fields but comes home every evening to spend time with Amara. In the evenings, they often sit by the fire in front of their house, exchanging dreams of the future and discussing what their child will be like. One evening, as the sun began to sink, Amara and Kwesi sat by the fire, basking in its warmth. The wind was gently ruffling the leaves on the trees, and in the distance they could hear the sounds of the nightlife of the savannah. Kwesi gently placed his hand on Amara's belly, feeling the baby inside kicking.
"Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?"
Kwesi asked with a smile, not taking his eyes off his wife. Amara, looking at him fondly, replied,
"I think it will be a girl. I feel it with all my heart. She will be as beautiful as her father and as strong."
Kwesi laughed.
"If she's as stubborn as you are, we'll have to work hard to handle her."
"You'll manage."
Amara replied confidently, stroking his hand.
"You're going to be a wonderful father."
That evening was filled with warm feelings and anticipation of happiness. It seemed that nothing could mar their future. But life, so unpredictable and sometimes cruel, was preparing Amara for a challenge she could not have expected. The settlement, though cut off from the rest of the world, had a rich and full life of its own. Every day was full of cares and responsibilities. The men worked in the fields, growing maize, sorghum, and other crops necessary for survival. Women took care of the home, cooking, raising the children, and maintaining the hearth. The most important thing for women, however, was the continuation of the family, raising children in the spirit of the ancestors, and maintaining traditions. The birth of a child was considered a great gift, a blessing from ancestors and gods. According to ancient beliefs, the soul of each child comes to this world from another dimension, from the world of ancestors, and parents should honor the new member of the family by surrounding him with care and love. The evening before the birth, Amara felt the time was right. Her mother, a wise and experienced woman, immediately set about making preparations. The whole house was filled with the smell of herbs and oils used to ease labor and protect mother and child from evil spirits. Amara's neighbors and friends came to her aid, for in this village childbirth was a community affair. At midnight the labor began. Amara fought for the life of her child under the silent prayers of the women and the crackling of the fire. Cries of pain were replaced by quiet whispers of comfort, and outside, men stood outside their doors, waiting for news of the new member of the family. Hours later, as the first streak of dawn was just appearing on the horizon, the first cry of an infant was heard in the air. Amara, exhausted but happy, took her daughter, wrapped in soft cloths, into her arms. The baby was tiny, with curly black hair and huge eyes that looked around the new world with interest.
"It's a girl,"
Amara's mother said quietly, handing the baby into her daughter's arms.
You were right.
She's beautiful.
Amara whispered, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks.
I'm going to name her Asiya, after my grandmother.
Asiya. Mashia.
Repeated Kwesi, leaning toward his wife and daughter.
Welcome to this world, our little star.
They did not know that this moment of happiness would be so short. Soon the darkness would fall, and their lives would become an ongoing struggle with despair and pain. The settlement awoke at first light, as it always did. People were preparing for the new day, going about their business, but there was an uneasiness in the air. Soon the news spread through the settlement Amara's newborn daughter was missing. No one could understand how this could have happened. The girl, who was named Asiya, disappeared, as if she had vanished into the night. Amara, still weak from childbirth, screamed in despair when she discovered that her daughter had disappeared. Kwesi and other men searched the entire area but found no trace of her. The women around the campfire that night swore they had not seen or heard anything strange. Soon the community began to prepare for the worst. In the ancient beliefs of these people, the disappearance of a child meant its death. Amara, however, refused to believe this. She continued to search for her daughter, hoping for a miracle. The hope smoldered in her heart that her little girl was alive, somewhere out there in the shade of the baobabs, protected by the spirits of the ancestors. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The search yielded no results, but Amara did not give up. She believed that one day she would find her daughter, that one day fate would bring them together again, even if it took her whole life. Thus began a story in this small African village that would touch not only the lives of one family, but the fates of many people around them. A story of love, faith and unquenchable hope that will lead Amara through the thorns to the stars. Amara smiled weakly, exhausted but happy. She held out her arms and the mother gently placed the infant on her daughter's chest. The girl was tiny, with soft features and large, not yet aware of the world. Amara held her close, feeling the baby rub her nose against her skin, and tears of happiness ran down her cheeks.
Hello, my baby.
Amara whispered, looking into the newborn's eyes.
I have been waiting for you for so long.
Kwesi, who had entered the house, saw his wife and daughter and froze, struck by the sanctity of the moment. He cautiously approached them, touched Amara's hand, and, with a tremor in his voice, said,
She is so beautiful, Amara. Thank you for this gift.
Amara raised her eyes to her husband and saw in them the love and joy that overflowed his heart. She knew this was a moment they would both remember for a lifetime. The baby girl they named Asiya was the embodiment of their love and hopes for the future. However, that same night something inexplicable happened, something that turned happiness into despair in an instant. After giving birth, Amara dozed off, exhausted from the day's events. The women who had helped her began to quietly leave the house, leaving her to rest. Kwesi stayed close by, watching their daughter sleeping peacefully on her mother's chest. Everything seemed perfect at this moment. The settlement was drifting into slumber, surrounded by the sounds of night nature, and Amara's home was peacefully quiet. But a few hours later, when Kwesi went outside for a moment to fetch fresh water, the silence of the house was broken by a strange rustle. Amara, who had been sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. She instinctively grabbed her chest and realized that the baby was not there.
Asai.
Amara said in a panic, looking around the room. The girl had disappeared. Amara jumped up from the mat, looking around every corner, trying to find her daughter. Her heart pounded frantically, her ears ringing. She called for Asiya again and again, but all she heard in response was the buzzing of night insects and the distant cry of a night bird. Kwesi, hearing his wife's cries, rushed into the house. He saw Amara scurrying around the room, desperately searching for her daughter.
Amara, what has happened? Where is Asiya?
He asked, trying to hold her by the shoulders.
She's gone.
Amara screamed, her eyes full of terror.
Kwesi, she's gone. She's been stolen.
Kwesi quickly looked around the room, but there was no sign of forced entry or struggle. He rushed outside, calling for help from neighbors and friends. Soon the whole village was on its feet, men with torches and guns searching every corner, looking under every bush and tree. The village elder, hearing the alarm, gathered the men together and ordered them to split into groups to search. The men searched the forest, the banks of the river, and the nearby fields. The women stayed with Amara, trying to comfort her, but she was beyond distraught.
Who could have done this?
Amara whispered, looking at her mother.
Why? What did I do wrong?
Don't blame yourself, my daughter.
Her mother replied, pulling her close to her.
It's not your fault. We'll find her, I promise.
But the search continued all night and the next day, but there were no results. The whole village was gripped by fear and despair. People spoke of evil spirits, of ancient curses, of forces beyond comprehension. Amara couldn't find a place to sit. She couldn't believe that her daughter could just disappear without a trace. Hope never faded in her heart, but every hour of waiting and uncertainty turned into torture. A few days passed, and the elder announced that the search was over. He urged the village to accept what had happened as the will of the spirits, as a test that had fallen to their lot.
We have done our best,
he said, looking at the gathered people.
but now we must humble ourselves and pray for the child's soul.
These words tore Amara's heart apart. She couldn't bear the thought that her daughter was dead, but a spark of faith smoldered in her heart that this was not the end. Despite the pain, she knew someday she would find her Asiya. And that faith, weak though it was what gave her the strength to go on living. After Asiya's disappearance, the settlement fell into a deafening silence. The panic that had gripped everyone in the first hours after the tragedy gave way to a heavy sense of loss and hopelessness. People, gripped by fear of the unknown, went back to their work, but the shadow of what had happened remained hanging over them, like a cloud that does not allow the sun to break through its thickness. The disappearance of the newborn girl had shaken the community to its very foundations, for such incidents that disrupted the natural order of things were rare here. Amara was in deep grief. A storm was raging in her heart, which neither words of comfort, nor prayers, nor rituals conducted by the elders could quell. Every corner of her home reminded her of what she had lost. The mat on which she lay that night, still smelling of the oils and herbs used during childbirth, now seemed cold and empty to her. The fire in the hearth that had once warmed her soul now burned without bringing comfort. Kwesi, her husband, was just as depressed. He tried to comfort Amara, but his own pain and guilt were too strong. The gleam in his eyes dimmed and his shoulders slumped under the weight of his loss. He couldn't forgive himself that at the moment when his wife and daughter needed him most, he had been powerless. And though he knew he could not have foreseen or prevented what had happened, that knowledge brought him no peace. With each day spent searching, with each new failure, his hope faded. The community, seeing the fruitlessness of the search and finding no explanation for this mysterious disappearance, gradually began to accept the tragedy as fact. People whispered that the girl had been taken by evil spirits, that she was the victim of an ancient curse or ritual. As time passed, more and more of the villagers began to believe that Asiya was dead. It was a tragedy in their eyes, but life went on, and they had to get back to their daily routines. Amara, on the other hand, couldn't accept it so easily. Her heart was torn between the desire to let go and the hope that her daughter was still alive. She would not participate in the rituals the elders had begun to perform to appease the soul of the deceased. Deep down, she refused to accept that her girl was dead, even when everyone around her insisted that she was. Even though all material evidence pointed to the fact that Asiya was no longer with them, her heart told her otherwise. Time passed, and with it came gradual humility. Amara began to learn to live with the pain. Her grief, at first all-encompassing and overwhelming, gradually transformed. It became part of her daily life, like a shadow that always follows its owner. She realized that the pain of loss was something she would have to carry with her always, but in that pain she found a kind of comfort. For while she felt that pain, she also felt connected to her daughter. Years passed, but the wound caused by Asiya's disappearance did not heal. The settlement slowly returned to normal, but Amara remained locked away in her world, where she went back to that night every day, going over the details in her head, trying to find missing clues or even a hint of what had happened. Every time the women from the village came to their house to support her, she saw pity and sympathy in their eyes. But over time, these visits became less and less frequent as the community began to forget about the tragedy, shifting to their own concerns and difficulties. Amara did not forget. She learned to hide her pain so as not to draw unnecessary attention. She smiled when she needed to, fulfilled her duties around the house and in the village, but the ghost of her lost daughter lived inside her constantly. Every morning when she woke up, she instinctively reached out to hug the child, but instantly remembered that he was gone. Every night, before she went to sleep, she made the same request to the ancestral spirits to bring back her daughter. Kwesi, seeing how Amara was suffering, tried to support her as best he could. He too could not forget what had happened, but unlike his wife, he found solace in his work. He immersed himself in the care of the field, in working for the community. But even in this, he saw a reminder of his loss. Each new planting, each harvest, reminded him of how their daughter could have grown with the fruit he nurtured. Sometimes, while working in the fields, he would freeze for a moment when he saw a shadow pass in the distance or heard a voice like a child's laughter. But these were only deceptive hopes, the play of his tormented mind. Years passed, and the settlement gradually began to forget about the tragedy. Life continued to go on as usual. New children were born, the rains came, the crops ripened. But for Amara, time stood still. She learned to live with loss, but never accepted it. She continued to believe that one day her daughter would return, even if it was a miracle. That faith, faint and barely perceptible, still smoldered in her heart, giving her the strength to move forward. She couldn't explain it rationally, but she knew that her mother had felt the same way when she herself was a child, and that this bond couldn't just disappear. With each passing year, Amara became more withdrawn and focused on her inner feelings. She avoided talking about her daughter, knowing that in response she would only hear comforting words that she could no longer bear to hear. It was as if her heart had shut down, protecting herself from further pain. She kept all her feelings inside, not allowing them to come out. But in the silence of the night, when the whole world was asleep, she would let her tears flow freely. And so the years passed. Life in the settlement went on, the seasons changed, people were born and died. But for Amara, time stopped the moment she discovered her daughter had disappeared. She lived in that moment, day after day, year after year, hoping for a miracle and gradually learning to live with the pain of loss. Hope, though faint, was her only compass in this vast ocean of grief and uncertainty. Amara and Kwesi's tragedy had left an indelible mark on their lives. Their love had grown stronger, but now it was coloured by the bitterness of loss and an unquenchable thirst for answers. Amara no longer spoke of her hope aloud, but continued to live with it as a part of herself. Even when everyone around her had accepted and forgotten, she remained true to her belief that her daughter was still alive somewhere, and that one day they would meet again. Time passed. Years had passed since Asiya had disappeared, and life in the settlement had gradually returned to normal. People lived their daily lives, tending to their fields, caring for their animals, raising their children. From time to time, however, there were conversations in the community that seemed to stir the long-quieted water. They were rumours, secretly passed from one person to another, becoming more and more strange and frightening. It began with a lone hunter who one day returned from the forest pale and anxious. The man, by nature calm and taciturn, told with a tremor in his voice that he had seen a little girl in a remote corner of the forest. She was standing among the trees, barefoot and dressed in a simple white dress, her long hair waving in the wind. The hunter assured him that the girl was real, though she was only visible for a moment before disappearing among the foliage, as if vanishing into thin air. At first his story was met with disbelief, for no one had lived in the forest for a long time, and the idea that a child could have been there alone seemed impossible. Soon, however, other testimonies appeared. First, shepherds who led their flocks to pastures on the outskirts of the forest began to tell of a strange figure glimpsed among the trees. They saw the girl only out of the corner of their eyes, but always when they tried to get closer, she disappeared. Some said they felt her presence, even when they could not see her, in the slight rustle of leaves, in the sudden movement of shadows, in a sudden cold gust of wind. The shepherds, superstitious people, believed that it could be a spirit of the forest and tried to avoid places where they saw her. Rumours gradually spread throughout the settlement. People began to speak of the girl as a mystical apparition, comparing her to the spirits of ancestors, who, according to legend, sometimes appear to the living to convey an important message or to warn against trouble. This talk alarmed many, and some began to link her appearance to ancient legends of cursed places and forgotten spirits. As adults met children fleeing into the forests, they began to warn them not to go too far, fearing they might meet this mysterious girl. As time went on, the rumors gained strength and more people claimed to have seen the girl. Hunters going out to hunt game told how they had occasionally spotted her between the trees. Workers picking fruits and herbs in the forest claimed to have felt her gaze on them. Some even swore they heard her quiet laughter, like a tinkling bell, somewhere deep in the forest. But as soon as they looked for her, she disappeared, leaving behind only a slight breeze and the feeling that someone was watching her closely. At first, the people of the settlement treated these stories with distrust and fear. Many believed that it was just a figment of imagination caused by superstition and fear of the unknown. However, as the stories about the girl began to be repeated with increasing frequency, people began to wonder if there was more to it than just a legend. They began to link the phenomenon to Asia's disappearance, though no one dared to speak of it out loud. Some of the elders of the settlement, knowing the ancient customs and traditions, began to cautiously hint that the girl's appearance might be a sign or portent of something important. They recalled ancient stories of children who had gone missing and returned in the form of spirits to fulfill some purpose. These stories, full of mysticism and the unknown, began to instill fear in the hearts of people who had not previously attached importance to such things. Over time, despite the fact that no one had ever seen the girl close enough to recognize her, many people began to believe that she was the spirit of a sire who had returned to deliver some important message or to complete something left unfinished. This spirit was a mystery that no one could solve, but its presence was felt more and more clearly. People tended to avoid the forest, especially at dusk, when the shadows grew longer and the forest seemed even more mysterious. For Amara, these rumors were a painful reminder of what she had lost. Though her heart could not believe that her daughter was dead, each new story about the girl from the forest made her return to the thought that perhaps her Asea was indeed dead, and was now a spirit. However, there was hope in her soul that if this was indeed her daughter, then maybe she could find a way to bring her back, or at least find out what had happened that ill-fated night. Soon the rumors began to disturb all the inhabitants of the settlement. Some of them began to perform rites and rituals to propitiate the spirits and ask them to leave them alone. People made sacrifices at the edge of the forest, hoping that this would appease the mysterious girl. Meanwhile, those who were more rational began to look for explanations for what was happening, believing it could have been someone's prank or just children lost in the woods. But the more time passed, the more confusing things became. People who had not believed in mysticism before began to notice strange things, unnatural sounds in the forest, strange wind movements, odors that should not be there. All this only increased anxiety and bewilderment. The rumors continued to multiply, and they began to be taken seriously. The elders decided it was time to hold a special ritual to contact the spirits of the ancestors and find out what they had to say. They realized that it was no longer possible to ignore what was happening, as it could lead to more trouble for the whole settlement. And so the day came when the elders, having gathered the community, held a ritual of purification and propitiation of the spirits. They brought gifts and said prayers, hoping to receive a sign or an answer from the spirits of the ancestors. But there was no answer, and the girl continued to appear as before. This further strengthened the people's conviction that something unusual had happened to them, that it was not just an accident or a play of imagination. Amara, having heard about the ritual, did not participate, feeling that she needed to figure out for herself what was going on. She couldn't just stand by and wait for it to be over. There was a determination brewing in her heart to go into the forest and find answers. She believed that if this was truly her daughter, she needed to see her for herself, to find out why she was here and what she had to say. But her fear of the unknown and the possibility of losing something dear to her again was too great to decide to take this step immediately. More and more people were avoiding the forest, especially its most remote corners. The locals were afraid to go there even during the day, for fear of meeting the mysterious girl. Even hunters and shepherds began to change their usual routes to stay away from the places where she had been seen. Every now and then someone would try to talk about it out loud, but the conversations would quickly end when they realized that no one knew what to do or how to explain what was happening. These strange events disrupted the measured life of the settlement, and people began to suspect that something more than just a ghost appearing in the forest awaited them. But what it was, no one knew. They went on with their lives, hoping that the situation would somehow resolve itself, or that they could find an explanation for it all. Nevertheless, the rumors about the girl from the forest did not subside. They continued to stir people's minds and hearts, causing them to question their beliefs and look for answers where there were none. And while many feared that these events would lead to trouble, no one could tell exactly what to expect or how to prepare for it. The settlement seemed frozen in anticipation of something that could change their lives forever. After a hot day, Amara went to the river for water as usual. As with years before, she thought constantly, yet she never forgot her suffering. She took a narrow path through dense foliage under tree limbs. A little breeze rustled the leaves, and flowers were fragrant. Grass rustling ahead masked a quiet water splash. Amara temporarily forgot her pain by the river. She frequented this nature place daily, enjoying its calm and quiet. Tonight's silence was exceptionally deep, like nature had frozen in anticipation of something elusive. The insects and tree-chirping birds were calm. Knelt, Amara dipped the mug in the clear, pleasant water. Her actions were automatic. Amara grabbed the full jug and went home. Her eyes caught movement across the river. A brief ghostly appearance froze her. Her heart skipped a beat and accelerated. Before seeing a figure in the trees, she thought she saw something surreal. It was female, little with long, dark hair that loosely spilled about her shoulders. Her white clothes were soiled and tattered, like she had explored the jungle. Her familiar gaze chilled the girl as she stood still, watching Amara. She believed her thoughts and experiences created the light and shadow illusion. The girl stood steady, so Amara knew she wasn't a ghost. Amara froze solid. As she looked at the girl, she felt pain, hope, and despair. Her brain failed to explain what was happening. She kept staring at the baby, feeling weird. While more elusive than worry or terror, it was familiar. She's too much like someone Amara lost years ago. She saw Asiya in every look and action. She stared at Amara with awe and dread. She appeared to recognize the person in front of her, but hesitant to approach. As tension built, Amara approached but stopped to prevent scaring the youngster. She thought everyone could hear her heartbeat. She contemplated Asiya's disappearance years. Could it be her? Might her daughter have miraculously survived and returned? The girl turned and ran into the trees before Amara could answer. She moved fluidly like a jungle animal. It shivered inside Amara. She choked on the words as she wanted to scream at the girl. All she could do was chase her to learn the truth. She sprinted over rough branches, rocks, and tree roots that hurt her bare feet. She kept going despite her gasping. A white figure raced across the woods. She was lightning fast and knew these locations best. Amara desperately pursued her to catch up before she left. The thick undergrowth and meandering trails of the woodland seemed to defy her. Amara weakened with each step but continued. The female was ahead, but they were growing apart. The woodland thickened as tree crown light diminished. Amara realized it would be dark soon, and she might lose the girl forever if she did not catch up. Tired, Amara rested in a clearing. Breathing heavily, her legs were quivering, and she was sweating. Leaves and footsteps remained after the girl disappeared. Amara awaited a sound to guide her through the silence. Like nothing had happened, the woods fell silent. She was devastated and lost. Her early hope faded. She relaxed her hands and slowly returned to the water. Every step seemed heavy, like an invisible force was forcing her back. She couldn't believe she'd lost her kid again after seeing a similar girl. Amara returned to the river as the sun set and shadows deepened. From the bank, she watched the tranquil water flow as usual. She was confused. She tried to understand, but her mind refused to believe. Did she see her daughter? Was her unquenched pain fueling her imagination? Amara felt restless at night. She imitated the riverbank girl in her hut. She was torn between hope and fear, conviction and uncertainty. She had to find this girl to discover her identity and why she resembled Asiya. She feared encountering something she didn't comprehend. Next morning, Amara returned to the river as the sun rose above the village. The girl vanished. She stood on the bank again, expecting a miracle, but it was peaceful. Amara went to the river every morning for several days, expecting her. She searched the river and trees for footsteps but found none. Amara was further confused when the girl vanished. Amara understood she couldn't stop. Her heart knew she was right, but her mind didn't. She contemplated her options. Maybe she should notify village elders or someone about her vision. No one had seen this girl so close, so she worried being called crazy. Her spirit knew this wasn't a coincidence. She realized. Possibly her daughter was alive and fate was giving her a chance to find her. Amara couldn't quit. She kept searching for the truth, despite her bitterness. Amara went to the river daily expecting to meet someone. Her spirit doubted, yet she continued. She needed the truth. Amara was willing to risk everything to find the answers to her questions. After that river experience, Amara was more determined. Each day she searched the place where she first saw the girl, but the forest was silent, hiding its secrets in thickets and huge trees. This meeting seemed like fate's gift to her to solve the puzzle that had plagued her for years. Without outside help, Amara investigated. No one but her believed her kid was alive after the settlement confirmed her disappearance. Her villager friends shunned old legends for fear of awakening them. But Amara couldn't relax. Who could solve it? She knew herself. Amara first contacted woodland dwellers who observed the girl. She knew hamlet murmurs had spread, but no one knew the facts. She summoned her bravery and asked others who saw the youngster in the forest's farthest corners. Shepherds, hunters, and herb and berry gatherers stated the girl appeared and vanished immediately. She stuck to the same neighborhood, as if held back. New evidence added to the conundrum, but none was conclusive. Amara wondered if the girl was her crazy imagination, but a voice kept her going. Before she knew, she couldn't stop. After weeks, Amara found a knowledgeable man. He was an old man from a nearby hamlet who traveled and walked through the woods where the girl was spotted. Wise eyes and dark shadows accompanied his old-fashioned speech. He told Amara that as a child, he had seen a child in one of the outlying settlements who looked like the one everyone thought was lost. He dismissed it, thinking it was a coincidence. He remembered it as a little town in the northwest forests with a life of its own, rarely visited by strangers. This could be a clue, Amara thought. Despite its isolation and risks, she visited that settlement. She only wanted answers to her difficult questions. She packed for the long trip, knowing she might not return. She would do anything for her daughter, thus she was unafraid of hardship. The forest trail was dangerous. The path was blocked by thickets with trees reaching toward the sky, as if obscuring everything they shaded. Nighttime woodland life made Amara's heart race as ancient ghosts whispered and twigs rustled and cracked. She persisted in finding her daughter. Arriving, she found a hidden town amid the trees. This peaceful place appeared to pause time. Amara connected with the unfriendly and mistrustful townspeople with her power and humor. She questioned around about the child who could be her daughter and learned through cautious clues and anecdotes that a girl lived in the hamlet and had emerged some years earlier under strange circumstances. Elders believed the girl was brought to the village one night as a child. One hunter said he found her abandoned in the forest and took the baby. She joined and was reared with them. Though they tried to raise her as their own, the elders knew she was not their blood and had something strange that kept her from fitting in. After hearing these stories, Amara knew this kid was her daughter. Her appearance, age, and odd behavior matched Amara's imagination of a seer. Most surprising was that the girl had vague memories of her past after years in this remote town. No one wondered how she remembered her mother so early, but often recalled her. Her childhood memories were a woman with soft hands and eyes, a lullaby-singing voice, and the fragrance of flowers. These fragmentary recollections kept the locals away, who reluctantly understood the girl was different. Amara realized she was discovering the truth. Though terrible people hadn't snatched her kid, circumstances were stronger. It was impossible to predict the challenge of this vast and bizarre jungle. She lived with strangers for years, but she never forgot her mother, no matter how she was raised. Amara gathered narrative bits. She learned the hunter who found her daughter was doomed. Because he lost his wife and child the year Asiya disappeared, he may have kept her after finding her in the woods. Love for the youngster filled his heart and relieved his fears. After the man died a few years ago, no one knew what happened the night he brought the girl to town. Amara was relieved to find her daughter, but heartbroken to be apart. After discovering the reality, she had to return her child. It was harder than it looked. After growing up among strangers, she adored her new home. She liked living here and didn't want to go, despite vague memories of her mother. She couldn't just take her daughter, Amara knew. She wanted her heart and childhood back. She talked more to the girl about their days together, her real family, and how much she missed her. Slowly the girl remembered, her foggy background cleared, and she knew herself, painful and slow. Amara observed her daughter becoming more conscious of her other world every day, but she also realized how painful it was for her to leave her parents. Though she felt like she belonged to Amara, her years in someone else's home were noticeable. Amara waited because she knew the girl needed time to decide. Meanwhile, settlement talks began. Amara spent a lot of time with her, so many noticed. Suspected her motivations. Her elders advised her to be patient and cautious because dramatic acts could hurt the child. They knew her journey home would take time and courage. Amara persevered, knowing it would take years. She thought only love and patience could save her daughter. Every day brought her closer to Amara, strengthening her memories and bond. Amara was willing to face many hardships to be with her daughter again and return her to the world she lost so long ago. After months of searching and hard work, Amara discovered her daughter. Amara was thrilled to find Asiya in a little community where she was reared as her own, but she soon learned that her experience was far from done. Amara saw memories of her own, and a connection to a new life and family in the eyes of the girl, who had once been her baby, which was hard to stomach. Asiya was raised by strangers who loved her without knowing her past. She made these folks her family and the settlement her home. She had no recall of her childhood, but her contact with Amara brought back memories and sentiments. She still felt tied to her life for many years. She was torn between feeling happy to see her real mother and sad to leave her caregivers. Amara had a tough dilemma. She could take Asiya home to her home settlement in her right as a mother, but she knew it would wreck her life. She couldn't ignore Asiya's long-time bonds with her new family or the people who had raised her daughter. These thoughts tore Amara's heart apart. She had spent her life locating her daughter, but now she faced an intractable problem. She wanted to return Asiya home to her hometown, where her family and friends were waiting for her, and she could be part of her real family again. However, she observed that the girl was happy in her new home, with people who loved her. Amara couldn't decide quickly. She learned that every choice had ramifications and had no right solution. She worried that taking Asiya would hurt her and damage her childhood life every day. However, leaving her here would mean admitting failure, handing her kid to others, and denying herself the chance to raise and see her grow. Amara meditated by the fire in her small cabin every night. Her thoughts reverted to the little girl she lost years earlier and to her dreams for her daughter's future. She imagined their lives, joys, and tragedies together. But now she knew that was all an unachievable ideal, and her reality was far more complicated. Amara gradually realized that true love for her daughter included accepting her choices, feelings, and life as well as being there for her. She saw that Asiya's bond to her parents was not merely a product of time spent together, but a profound feeling of love and care. Amara watched the girl laughing, playing with other settlement kids, and thanking her foster parents. These instances demonstrated that Asiya had found her position and was pleased in the world. Amara knew her heart was hurting and wanting. Her desire of having her daughter back was close yet elusive. Amara realized she may never fully reclaim her daughter, but the concept was agonizing. She couldn't leave Asiya, knowing she would never see her again or speak the words that had grown up in her heart over the years. The right thing to do? To remove Asiya and shock her by forcing her to leave her loved ones, or to leave her here, knowing she would be happy even without Amara. Such a question kept Amara guessing. She knew her choice would alter the girl's life and have ramifications. As the weeks went, Amara became increasingly inclined to leave Asiya in her new house. Her inner self resisted every time she prepared to take that step. She couldn't give up her ambition of mothering this girl. Her heart was divided between duty and love, desire and understanding what was best for the girl. Amara struggled with the possibility that her daughter no longer needed her. Since Asiya had grown up, her life was in another world that would not fit Amara. Although it was hard, Amara realized that a mother's love wasn't selfish. Despite the difficulty, she had to put her daughter's needs first. Amara realized she needed to talk to Asiya's parents. She knew they adored her daughter and would be sad to lose her. However, Amara felt this conversation was necessary to make an informed decision. She told them everything on her mind and listened to their thoughts. Amara didn't anticipate this talk to be simple as she collected her courage and headed to Asia's foster home. She was surprised that her daughter's foster parents understood and respected her. They knew Amara had a right to her daughter, but they worried about the girl's well-being during the sudden transition. Amara recognized that their passion for Asia was equal to hers after their conversations, which deepened her doubts. After much consideration, Amara decided to trust the girl's heart. She admitted that she had no authority to decide her daughter's future. Amara knew this choice would be hard and terrible, but it was the only way to offer Asia her own destiny, something she had been denied years earlier. Amara offered her daughter a choice of accommodations. It was the proper thing to do, even though her heart hurt. She understood she had to appreciate and accept Asia's decision. This option tested Asia and Amara's love and willingness to let go of what she had been searching for so long. Waiting for the girl's decision was stressful. Amara didn't know her response, but she was ready to decide. She learned that true love is letting your child be happy, even if it means separation. Amara knew her daughter would take the path nearest to her, which would end their journey that began with a mystery disappearance years earlier. Now Amara had to wait, hoping her daughter's choice would be right. Her fate and Asia's were interwoven, but that shouldn't hold her back. Amara was ready for new challenges with a loving heart. It had been weeks since Amara advised her daughter choose her own place to reside. Amara and everyone engaged in this tough scenario have struggled. After an anxious and hopeful wait that seemed to last forever, the girl chose. Asia, a kid, understood the gravity of this choice. Her small heart was torn between her affection for her early caregivers and her growing attachment with her mother. She was troubled by contradictory thoughts because she knew every decision would affect herself and her loved ones. Despite her preparation for her daughter's decision, Amara couldn't contain her enthusiasm. Her days of pondering and praying were full with inconsistencies, but she learned to accept the results each morning. She realized her love for her kid must be unselfish, and that caring for a child means letting her select her own path. Finally, Asia told Amara her decision. She picked between two worlds she could live in, not two families. The girl's choice showed insight beyond her age. She wanted to stay linked to her essential homes and worlds. Asia's simple but smart answer was to alternate between her foster family and Amara. This option shows the girl didn't want to lose either of her loved ones. She chose to keep her families together, surprising everyone. Amara considered this choice miraculous. She recognized that her daughter wouldn't make a hasty decision that would take her away from anything vital. Asia wanted to see Mom, her biological mother, and her longtime caregivers. This outcome was not what Amara wanted, but it gave her courage and hope. Amara quickly bonded with Asia's foster family. It was hard at start since both parties were scared. The foster parents feared losing the girl they thought was theirs, and Amara feared her daughter would never return. Their shared interests and love for Asia eventually brought the two families together. Amara and Asia's foster parents initially avoided each other to avoid problems. They eventually gained trust. They realized that working together could help the girl stay connected to both worlds and achieve their shared goal of her well-being. Asia's idea to split time between families began to work. The girl spent time with Amara learning about her heritage and culture at her home village. She learned the crafts her mother wanted to teach her and met long-lost relatives. Every interaction with Amara increased their closeness as the girl discovered new things. Asia also returned to her foster family to live her usual life. She enjoyed the love and caring of her family. The girl maintained her childhood stability and security during these moments. Both families eventually found methods to communicate. Amara introduced Asia's foster parents to local customs by inviting them to her settlement. The foster parents hosted Amara and her family, showcasing their culture and lifestyle. These visits helped them overcome mistrust. Communication grew into a partnership. Though dissimilar, the two towns shared cultural experiences and traditions, building trust and respect. Amara came to accept that she could not be Asia's sole mother when she saw her daughter's foster parents as allies. Her foster family adored her, but they also saw the value of her link with Amara. Both families cared for Asia, making her life unique and full of experiences. She became strong and independent by understanding and appreciating both cultures. She became involved in both villages, linking them. Amara learned a harsh yet crucial lesson. She learned that a mother's love is about letting go when necessary for the child's good. She now appreciates her daughter's excitement in her new family and enjoys their time together. This long journey ended in peace and understanding. Amara and Asia's foster family agreed since they loved her. They survived and supported each other through their hardships. Other settlements learned from Amara and her daughter how to transcend differences and construct bridges between realms. The lost girl became a symbol of togetherness and power as the two towns cooperated and shared knowledge. After years, Amara understood that her long journey was worthwhile. She gained her daughter and a new perspective on motherhood. Her life had significance, and a story of suffering and loss concluded with reconciliation and a new beginning, where the two families became allies and the two worlds drew closer.